The purple book is a good book to use for struggling second graders, and we're going to go through a few of the questions so that you can see how to do this. You'll, of course, already need to have printed out the booklet and the recording sheets and the cutouts and done the cutting out before you do this with a student. You'll also need to have 35 counters. I recommend using counters such as your two-sided counters or pennies, but not blocks that snap together, because students often take too long trying to snap those together, even if you tell them not to. So once you have the everything printed out and cut out, you're going to start with question 1. Question 1 doesn't have anything that the students need to look at in the book, but they will need to be using the counters. So each of the questions is designed so that you can just read it out loud, pretty much following the script in the recording sheet. So I would just ask for number 1, please count out loud how many counters are on the table. I would have already sort of spread out 32 of the counters. Leave 3 in reserve. You're going to use those later. You're going to watch the students to see how they count. Are they using one-to-one correspondence? Are they able to track? Are they remembering all of the word names correctly? When they're done counting, even if they've gotten the answer wrong, you can ask question 2, how many are there? If they start counting over from 1, that's a suggestion that they're still needing support with cardinality. If they're able to just look at the counters and say whatever they think the answer was from their previous work on number 1, then you've got a pretty good sense that they're developing cardinality. If when you get to question 3, you're going to just move the blocks around or the counters around, just shuffle them around, and then just say, so how many are there now? At that point, if the student has to start counting over from 1, then you're going to be testing for conservation of quantity. When you get to question 4, would you count the blocks by 2s? This is going to be really interesting because many students will move 1 counter but say 2. So this is really indicative of the idea that they may have learned to rote count by 2s, but they don't necessarily understand what that means. When you're done with these 4 questions, you're going to come over and just finish writing comments in the comments box. You've got room over here to put your notes as well. And after the assessment is over, I would recommend right after the assessment, you'll be able to go back and decide which of these levels to circle for each of the chunks of questions. In this case, if a student was still struggling to just even correctly count the counters up through 10, they would be emergent. But you'll be able to read each of these descriptions and make your best guess. It's just a first experience with this. You're going to need the blocks out for question 5, where you're going to now take the 32 that are on the table and just sort of casually put 3 more blocks on. Don't let the student necessarily see how many more you're putting on. At that point, you're going to ask the student to put the blocks into groups of 10. And once they've done that, then ask how many are there now. If you see somebody who's just starting to count all the way from 1, then they're certainly not able to use tens very effectively yet. You'll also be able to look at the student who counts 10, 20, 30, and they're in the AC1 or AC2 category. You can put the blocks away at the end of question 5, and now you're going to move to looking at the booklet. When you get to number 6, I use a piece of blank paper to show the students just the first row of 4, and I'll hide all of the other dots, and I'll just ask, or I'll just say, so here are 4 dots. Then I'll slide the paper down and show the next row, and then I'll say, and now I've just put 4 more, we're looking at 10 more dots. So then I'll ask, how many do you see all together? So now you get a chance to see, do they have to start counting from 1, or do they have some strategy for putting the 10 and 4 together? Once they've established that those first 2 rows are 14, I'll slide the paper 1 more row down, and I'll say, so here are 10 more counters or dots. How many are there all together? And again, you get to watch, or do they have to go back and count from 1, or do they have a more sophisticated strategy? For students who are starting from 1 each time, I just stop. I don't even ask the next 2 rows. But for students who are able to do something else, I will slide the paper down and show them the next row of 10 and then the final row of 10 and record the different ways that they might be working with this. Starting with number 7, you've got word problems. Remember, you're not giving the students paper and pencil. I usually don't have any manipulatives out at this point, although if a student really struggles, I might ask if they want to try it with a manipulative. But in general, I'm trying to see what they can do mentally. Remember to ask follow-up questions. Once they tell you 7, you can ask them, how did you get that? Now, of course, if you've already seen that they're using their fingers, you don't need to ask that follow-up question. Question 8 is another word problem, as are 9 and 10. They get progressively more challenging. So at some point, if students are really struggling with 7 and 8, you may decide not to press too much on 9 and 10 or just skip them altogether. When you get to question 11, let's go back down to the assessment sheet and look at what the question says. You're just going to ask the student to start counting from 187, and they're going to keep counting until you tell them to stop. The number 203 is where you can ask them to stop. You're going to be watching to see whether they are able to continue the count sequence correctly and whether they're getting stuck or having trouble crossing over the 100. On number 12, there's a page in the booklet where each of the numbers is shown. You're going to use a piece of paper and screen, and for each number you're going to ask the student to read that number and then tell you the number that comes right after it. Number 13 and 14 are just very similar to numbers 11 and 12, only now the kids are going backwards. Number 15, you're going to need the cards for the fractions. I shuffle them up ahead of time, and then I'll flip one over at a time and ask the student to read it. I'll be able to hear whether they have a sense of how to read fractions. And then for number 16, I give them all of the cards and ask them to put them in order from smallest to largest. You'll be able to see whether students have a sense that 1/6 is the smallest and 1/2 is the largest. If they do the reverse, then it's probably pretty likely that they're just looking at the denominators for value. Number 17, the answer is 14, that there are 14 $10 bills in 140. And you'll need another set of cards for number 18. After that, you're going to be asking the basic facts questions, and there are visuals for you in the booklet. Ask all of the addition questions first, and then go back and ask the subtraction questions so that the kids don't have to switch back and forth too frequently between addition and subtraction. And here are the cutouts. So enjoy doing this assessment with your students, and then remember to type up the chart with the results for each question, and on the right hand side any that the students struggled with. And we'll be looking forward to having you share your results in class in a couple of weeks. Enjoy!